Hi everyone, how are we getting on? Returning then to our menu creation. Can you believe it? We've reached the 8th class. And it seemed simple, didn't it, at the beginning? But as we've gone through these different classes, creating a menu may have sounded simple, but as we're creating a customized menu, there's quite a lot involved, isn't it? However, it is possible, of course, to just use traditional elements, traditional buttons. That would be a lot easier. But it's also nice to be able to understand how you can, push the boundaries and make things a little bit more, sophisticated. Okay, that's really the idea behind why we're working in this way. Okay, then. So in this class, we're going to create a button effect, which is ready-made in Unreal. So that helps us. But since we're customizing this, we're going to have to create it. Okay, so first I'll show you what the ready-made is like, and then I'll show you what we'll do. So I'll create a random button just anywhere, maybe around here, and then I'll show you what, as I said before, about the appearance here. Okay, as you hover over it, you can change the color, and with it pressed, you can change the color of that as well. I'm just making some random differences here. We're not worrying about it too much, just to demonstrate how it works. Okay, so I created a color for the normal button. Okay, a color for when the mouse is hovered over it, a color for when you click on the button, and now I'll show you it in practice when we press play. Okay, so here's my button, hover over it, normal. Okay, so it changes, doesn't it? So when I press the cursor on it, it's turned yellow. When I click it, it turns purple or lilac. Okay, so that's how it works. So this is the interactivity effect, and it's common in these sorts of interfaces, but there are differences. So when it comes to design, we've got a bit more imagination, no doubt, right? So we can make it simple like this, but you can make it a bit more unique to your design if you want to. So we can take a look at that. This is what we're going to really focus on in our menu in this class. So in this case, we've already created a button, okay, and the sound when you go over them, and that just shows that you're interacting between them, doesn't it? Now that would already be enough, but we can go further. We can try and add more functionality here and also increase your knowledge at the same time. As I said, this is the already made function. Okay, so I have the ability to change how the button appears. So let's delete this for now. So now here, this is the rectangle that we created for our button. So this is our button, okay? And it has these functions here. Okay, same ones, normal, hovered, and clicked. So we can change the color that it appears. Let's see if it changes when we play. Okay, so it didn't change because we left it transparent. So let's select box, and now let's play. Okay, see that? So now it's a button function and it's red when you hover over it, but it doesn't look great, does it? It doesn't look particularly user friendly. So in this case, we want to have a nice clean design. Okay, so this button has this function, which is great, but we don't want to use this type of button. Okay, so we're using none. We need, though, to create a function to change the text color. So our goal would be to change the text color as opposed to the box. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Well, remember the text is not a button, so we don't have the hovered, unhovered options, okay? Because it's just text. So we'll have to simulate this in a different way or force this to happen in Unreal. Now there is a resource called bind. What do we mean by bind? What does it do? Well, bind is used to change the color, or you can use it to change the color. So I want this button, let's say, to be this color. Let me pick red. Okay, so let's suppose I want this shade of red. I'll copy the code here, which is the color code that I want. Control C to copy that. and I'll put it in a notepad just in case I need it again in the future. Okay, so that notepad is on another screen. Don't worry about that. There we go, just there. So it's here for me to remember. Okay, so I can change this color here, but if I change the color, it will change forever, won't it, to red. So there is this resource called bind. What is it? It's like if you create a function for this parameter, even though there isn't a button here, we can create a function to control this parameter. So let's do it. I'll create a binding for the color opacity parameter. Look, see what happened here? It's created a function for us. Now, we didn't go through functions specifically in this course as of yet. Actually, we went through them when we were using them all the time in reality. We just didn't speak of them in length. But inside a node, we mentioned it in the very beginning, the first class about C++. Inside a node, it gathers many lines of code and different things that execute a function. Okay, so I have to provide some inputs for some functions, and the engine returns a function or an event or an output. Okay, so some functions have an output, a return value. Every function has an input and an output, correct? But we don't know what we have unless you double click at it. If you double click here, it says this is a Visual Studio. And what does that mean? Well, it means that it can be opened in C++. Now, we aren't working in C++, so we can forget that. However, in Unreal, there is a way to create custom functions. Let me explain what I mean. For example, I have this function here. It's a function to control the render and play the sound, right, that we looked at before. If I select everything and right click, I can collapse the function. And this is turned into a node, or it is turned into a node function, right? So what this means is it creates a function exactly like a node of what was there before. And I can even rename it, for example, to whatever I like. Let's say example. See how it's changed it now? So since it's been done via Blueprint, I can open it in the Blueprint. And this is a function, a bind. Okay, so it gives me an input, and it has the nodes which I set up before. There's another Blueprint where we'll use this. We'll set this up and use it later on. But I wanted to demonstrate the concept to you. So it's pretty much what's happening here, okay? When you create a bind, that's exactly what it's doing. You're creating a function to control the parameter. So this is what I did when I clicked on bind. And it's even named get color and opacity for me. I can rename this if I want to. So let's call it color start button. Cool. And so I've got that function here with a starting event, and I've got a return node too, return value. So what we're going to do with this, well, we're going to do this. Let's proceed with the principles that we explained. I create a bind, and now I need to create a function. What function do I want to create here? The ability to change the button color, right? When the cursor is over the button. So I want to change the text color specifically. So how do I do this? Let's find out. Let's pull this over here. So when do I want things to happen? When the start button is pressed, okay? But I can't create a button event here. Why not? Because I'm already using that, okay? When it's clicked, I'm already using one of those events. It's already been created in my event graph, okay? Just down here. So it's already associated here. But I can do this another way. I can create a condition or a conditional node. Do you remember that from the previous classes? So when something happens, it's true. When it doesn't happen, it's false. So I can use that resource. Let's see what this is like in practice. So I have to know when this button is being hovered over by the cursor. So I can pull this here, and there's a function called isHovered. and it's a conditional function. So basically, it asks the question, is this hovered by the mouse? Yes or no? And it's going to return the yes or no, a Boolean variable, because it's red, remember, true or false. And if I have a Boolean, I can have a branch, which I can link here. Okay, so I can put that together. And when the start button is being hovered here, it can then, we can go up to here, it's true, and it's going to follow that path. If it's not being followed, if it's false, if it's not being hovered, it's false, and it will follow a different path, okay? So now I can create the function. Here I have the function for true, and I'll create it again, another return node, which will be for false, okay? So I need to return this parameter here. This return value is going to go there. So this return value is the color value. Basically, there's nothing changed here. So let's do this. Let's put this together now. How do I put this parameter? Well, remember that this is a node of the structure kind. You see that here? So it's a structure node, and I can use split, right click, split pin. Okay. And now I have a color here, and I have two other parameters. Okay. Specific color and foreground color. So for us, it would be the text color. Okay. And I'll do the same thing here. When the button is hovered, it's true. And when it's true, it's going to go there. So here it will be set to that whatever color I want. I'll get that color that I selected here. I can copy that. And I can paste it in this field here. So that's going to be our red, okay? And when it's false, it's going to go back to the initial value, which is black. Compile and save. So what happens? I create a little function for this button. I created a bind as well for the parameter, didn't I? Okay. So just to summarize, this is the color parameter for the text, and it's conditioned to the action of the cursor over the button. Okay, so when the cursor is above the start button, this is where it will begin. It will work out whether the cursor is hovering over it, and then give us the color depending on whether it's true or false. And that's it. Now, I know at first this might look quite complicated, but it's quite logical when you think about it. And feel free to go over what we've just shown you again. Knowing that this function exists, though, helps us to be able to create even more customized things in our menu, in our widget. So you can now see the benefit of paying attention to the details panel and the nuances within, okay? So there's several different parameters that we can use that have the bind feature on them. So you can see now we can do a lot more than what it may appear is possible on the face of things. Okay, so I'll create a function, and you can define what will happen with that function here. So that's what we explained. But as a reminder, the return value of this function is always the parameter that you're editing. And you can't add a text where it's supposed to be a parameter. Here it's going to require a text because the parameter is text. So here it will require a color parameter, an RGB, because that's the parameter, and so on and so forth. Just according to each specific parameter, you have a different kind of function. Okay, this is really interesting for us. It's a nice one though, isn't it? Though, to help us to improve the quality of our menus. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Let's press play. So we can see it at work. We can see as I hover over it, it's nicely changing color. You notice how it's working. Nice. The text is actually a bit larger, isn't it? Or maybe it's just me. It's just moving position as we set it up and adjusting the color. Nice. So what I'll do is I'll speed up the video and I'll add the same parameter to all the other buttons. Okay. simply by copying and pasting what we did before. I'll do all this. You can follow it if you want to, and we'll see you in a minute. All right, everyone. So you saw how I added everything together. Now let's test it to see if it's worked. Okay, so here I have the same function. It's switching the color of all the menus. Perfect. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you in this class, the bind effect, which is a really cool feature to be able to add to the skill set you've already got. This opens a really interesting way of working with widgets within our menus, and it can be useful for so many other things that you want to bring to the screen. Some really cool effects as well. So if you are not too familiar with what we showed you, keep going over it so you can become more familiar, and we'll keep going forward in our next class. Okay, see you soon.